Empire of Ashes. Episode 9. The Glass House. Written by Mia. Dario. My father taught me that everything a man loves is a door someone will eventually walk through to gut him. I spent 33 years deciding he was wrong, one careful brick at a time. My wife unbuilt it in a cannery in under a minute. And the worst part, the part one couldn't say out loud, the part one could barely say to the inside of my own skull at 4 a.m. in a house made of glass, was that she'd unbuilt it by saving my life. That's the thing about Lena Russo. She doesn't leave you even the dignity of a clean wound. I'd had 11 hours to decide how I felt about her, and I'd arrived nowhere, which never happens to me. I am a man who decides. I decided to take over a dying empire at 25. I decided to marry a stranger to clear her dead father's debt, because the optics were good, and it cost me nothing, and the photographs were excellent. I decided, somewhere around the third breakfast, against every law of self-preservation my father ever beat into me, that the quiet, careful woman across my table was the one person in my poison city I could hand the truth to. I was right about that, as it turns out. She was the one person I could hand the truth to. She just already had a better copy of it, sewn into her coat. My family's death warrant, in her dead father's hand. You loved me by lying, I told her in the cannery, and I'd meant it as the cruelest thing I knew. It was only afterward, in the dark, that I understood I'd told her the truth about us both. Because I was doing the same thing, wasn't I, sitting in the wreck of my marriage at 4 a.m, deciding I hated her, when the actual truth was that I had never in my life wanted anyone the way I wanted the woman who'd just proven she was exactly as dangerous as I'd spent 33 years waiting for someone to be. I keep the memory of her in that cannery the way a man keeps a photograph of the house that burned down with everyone he loved inside it. She stepped out of the dark at the edge of the lamplight into a room full of Falcon guns, and she laid her father's book on the table, and she beat the oldest killer on the coast at the only game he respects. And she did it without once looking at me, because she knew that if she looked at me she'd lose her nerve, and she decided my life was worth more than her nerve. That is the single most attractive thing anyone has ever done in my presence. It is also the moment I learned she'd been lying to me with her whole body for 3 months. And I have not yet found a wall in my chest strong enough to keep those two facts in separate rooms. They keep meeting at 4 a.m, in a house made of glass, where there is nowhere at all to hide from a thing you can plainly see. Nico found me at dawn in my father's study. I'd spent 8 months learning to think of it as my study. It felt like Salvatore's again this morning, because I just learned, the way Lena learns things, that he'd been lying to me about the size of the grave I'd inherited. You look like him, Nico said. From Nico, that's the cruelest thing he owns. Sitting in that chair, deciding to be alone about something. Don't. The Falcons held. She bought us 11 days and a truce. You were there, you saw what she... I saw your wife walk onto a killing floor with a book and walk off at having beaten old Falcon at his own table, which your father never once managed in 40 years. Nico set his phone down in front of me, screen up. And now I'm going to ruin your morning a second time. The truce isn't the problem anymore. The commission called. The room went cold and clear the way it does when the work starts. When... An hour ago, they've heard there was nearly a war on the wharf. They've heard the word insolvent hung on the Marchetti name in 3 different mouths this week. Nico's jaw was a blade. They want you in front of the table, Dario. Both of you, the heir and his bride. to demonstrate that the House of Marchetti is strong and stable and solvent and married. Or they'll decide the corpse is a corpse, and they'll carve you up themselves before the falcons can and call it keeping the peace. I knew what a commission carving looked like. I'd watched one, at 19, standing at my father's shoulder where he'd put me to teach me the lesson. The Bianchi family, grown weak, and let the city smell it, summoned to answer for their stability, and walking out of the room no longer a family. Their territory parceled to 4 stronger houses before the coffee went cold. The last Bianchi son shaking hands with the men who'd just eaten his name because the only other option was the harbor. 60 years of blood ended in an afternoon, politely, over a table. That's mercy, my father had told me on the drive home. They let the boy live. Weakness is the only sin we punish, Dario, because it's the only one that gets other people killed. Never let them smell it on you. And here I was, reeking of it, the corpse of an empire in a good suit, with a wife who'd just announced to the entire waterfront that the corpse had a clever new widow. So there it was, my father's last gift, blooming right on schedule. The empire was broke. The city smelled the blood. And the only things standing between the House of Marchetti and the long knives of the commission were the 2 things I no longer had: money and a marriage. They'll see through us, I said. The commission have eaten lies for breakfast for 60 years. They'll look at the 2 of us across that table and they'll know the marriage is a corpse, same as the empire. Then you'd better make them not know. Nico didn't blink. Whatever's broken in that glass house, you've got days, maybe a week, to make it look like the strongest marriage and the strongest house in the city, in front of the only people who can order all our deaths at once. The woman who did what she did in that cannery can do this in her sleep. He stood. And so can you. The second you climb out of your father's chair long enough to remember you'd both rather live. At the door he paused. Go tell your wife the 2 of you have to be more married than you've ever been. Starting now. Exactly when you can least stand the sight of her. That's the family business, Dario. Your father would have been proud. Lena. He told me in the breakfast room, which had become the cruelest room in the house. 11 weeks of pretending to be a wife had happened in that room. The performance that stopped being a performance somewhere around the 3rd morning, the slow accidental truth of us, butter and coffee and a man learning that I took my eggs the way his mother had, and going quiet about it. Now we sat at the same table with all of it in pieces between us, and he told me, in the flat, managed voice he'd learned from the father he swore he'd never become, that the commission wanted to see a strong marriage and that we were going to give them one. You want me to perform our marriage, I said. For killers. After. I want nothing from you. He didn't look up from his coffee. I want to not be murdered by the commission. You're the price of that. The same way clearing your father's debt was the price of you, in the beginning. We're transactional. You and I. You taught me that last night very thoroughly. So, let's transact. Now he looked at me, and the wall was perfect. Be my wife in front of the commission. Sell it. God knows you can. You sold it to me for 11 weeks, and I'm the man who knew you best. And then, because the house was glass and there was nowhere to hide, I watched it cost him to say it. A muscle in his jaw. The half second too long his eyes stayed on my mouth before he dragged them back to the coffee. 11 weeks in his house had made me fluent in the small tells under Dario Marchetti's stillness, and the most dangerous thing I learned across that ruined breakfast table was that the wall wasn't keeping me out. It was keeping him in. The man who'd told me he loved me by lying wanted to come around that table and put his hands in my hair as badly as I wanted to let him, and we both knew it, and we both knew the wanting changed nothing at all. Because the thing between us now wasn't the absence of feeling. It was the presence of a knife we'd each watched the other one hold. You can want someone with your whole body and still not be able to turn your back on them. He'd taught me that. I'd just taught it back to him in a cannery with my father's book. It was meant to wound, and it did, and I let it, because I decided something on the long cold drive home from the cannery, and I wasn't going to be knocked off it by a man being cruel to keep from breaking. I had decided I was going to win him back. Not apologize my way back. I'd done nothing I wouldn't do again. I'd saved his life with the only weapon I had, and I would do it 100 more times. Not explain my way back, either. He'd heard every explanation and sealed the door on all of them. I was going to win him back the way my father won every fight that ever mattered, by being so undeniably, ruthlessly useful to the thing he loved most that he could no longer afford to keep me at arm's length. And Dario Marchetti loved exactly one thing more than he now hated me. His people. His house. The dying empire he was holding up with his bare hands and his dead father's good suits. And I was a forensic accountant who had just read the entire corpse, page by page, in my own father's handwriting. My father raised me for exactly one purpose, and he would have hated what I was about to do with it. He spent my whole childhood turning me into the weapon that would take the Marchettis apart. Flashcards of shell companies instead of fairy tales. The smell of his cigarettes and his patient voice. Follow the money, Lena. The money never lies, even when every hand that holds it does. He made me to be the ruin of this family. And here I was, about to spend every ounce of it keeping the family alive. Fallen already months ago. I'd just been too well trained to write it down in the ledger, for the son of the man who'd had him killed. If there's a hell, my father isn't in it. He was too good for it. But if there's a place good men go to be disappointed, he's there now, watching his blade of a daughter decide to save the empire he died trying to end. And I would give a great deal to be able to explain it to him. I'm not ending them, Papa. I found something better to do with everything you made me. I found a person worth becoming the opposite of a weapon for. I can save the empire, I told him. The real one. The numbers, not the performance. That got through the wall. Barely. A flicker. My father's ledger isn't only your death warrant, Dario. It's the single most complete map in existence of what Salvatore actually did, which makes it the only document in the world that shows how to unbury it. The twice-promised collateral, the shells, the commission paper. I can find you real money in there. Enough to stand in front of the commission solvent and let them go home disappointed. I held his eyes. I can do in a week what your accountants couldn't do in 8 months. Because I'm the one who was raised to take this family apart, and taking a thing apart and putting it back together are the same skill, pointed 2 different directions. I made myself say the rest of it. So let me, not for forgiveness, as a transaction, since that's the only door you'll open. I save your empire. You keep all of us alive. And we call it square on the debt I owe you for 11 weeks of lying to your face. For a long moment, he just looked at me, and something worked behind the closed door of him, and I let myself believe I'd reached him on the one frequency he had left, the empire, the people, the cold, clean math. Then he said the thing that turned the whole board over. You think your father's ledger is the complete map. He said it slowly, almost gently, which from Dario is never gentle at all. The whole corpse accounted to the cent. That's what you've staked your entire life on. The honest book your honest father died for.
He stood.
He crossed to the portrait on the far wall. To the safe behind it, I had never once seen him open in 11 weeks of cataloging this house, and he took out a second book. Older, smaller, blood-stained black at one corner. I knew that corner. I'd know it anywhere. It was my father's blood. I was the one who'd identified his body. The room tilted, very slightly, the way it had in the cannery, and I put my hand flat on the cold marble to keep the world where it belonged. I did not give Dario the satisfaction of watching me knead the table. But I kneaded the table. He set it on the breakfast table beside the cooling coffee between us, the way you lay down a body. Then you should know there were two of them, Dario said. Your father kept two ledgers, Lena. The one he sewed into your coat, and the one he was carrying to my father the night he died, to make a deal. His ruined eyes finally met mine, full and direct, for the first time since the cannery. I've had it for 8 months, since the night he died. And before you save my empire with your father's honest book, you should probably read the other one. The one where you find out exactly what Aldo Russo was willing to do, and to whom. To be continued. That was episode 9 of Empire of Ashes. If this one has its hooks in you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus Dario POV bonus scenes are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
Heir Mia.
Thank you for listening.